People talk a lot about passive income.
It is not a thing. Look, there's two ways to get wealthier, and passive income is not part of that equation. But what's really important for people is how we should spend money. Because I've written about money and finance and investing for 20 years, and I can tell you the correlation between how much you spend and how happy you are. It can exist, but it is not as simple as you think.
Morgan Housel is the legendary financial guru,
revealing that everything we've been told about saving and spending money
could be our biggest downfall. And here's why.
If you're unhappy with your life, it is a very easy assumption to make that if you had more money, a bigger house, a better car, whatever it might be, things would be better. And it's a lie we tell ourselves, of course. Because here's the truth. So much of spending is a psychological itch that you're trying to scratch. And that manifests in so many different ways. For example, life is a competition. It doesn't matter how well I'm doing, it matters how well I'm doing relative to you. And the most tangible way to do that is through material stuff.
I was reading some funny stats. They say that if you win the lottery, the probability of your neighbor going bankrupt increases.
It's an amazing statistic. So be careful who you socialize with, because you're going to anchor to them as a baseline level of success and happiness.
So is it wrong to buy a Rolex?
Absolutely not. But when it's controlling your personality, it's no different than any other addiction, where it's forcing you to do things that you otherwise don't want to do.
What about people who don't seem to spend anything?
It's just as dangerous. Like there's something called post-traumatic broke syndrome. And I'll talk about that. But I guarantee you that everyone can spend money in a way that's going to make them happier.
So if I wanted to make a framework to know how to spend my money, where do I start? But also, based on everything you know about money, if I want to get complete financial freedom, what's the 5 things that I should be thinking about?
The first thing that I think that's most important is
I see messages all the time in the comments section that some of you didn't realize you didn't subscribe. So if you could do me a favor and double check if you're a subscriber to this channel, that would be tremendously appreciated. It's the free thing that anybody that watches this show frequently can do to help us here, to keep everything going in this show in the trajectory it's on. So please do double check if you subscribed. And thank you so much, because in a strange way, you're part of our history and you're on this journey with us. And I appreciate you for that. So yeah, thank you. Morgan, everybody loves to talk about investing. They love to talk about saving money. But I've never heard anybody emphasize the importance of spending money. You've written this book, The Art of Spending. So it begs the question, why would someone like you, who sells tens of millions of copies of their books when they write about something and really, really cares about the art of writing, commit themselves to writing a book about the art of spending when you could have written anything that you wanted to and it would have been a success?
So I've written about money and finance and investing for 20 years, and almost never had I myself said, what is my spending philosophy? I can tell you how I invest. I can tell you how I save. I can tell you why I do those things. If 5 years ago, if you said, Morgan, tell me your philosophy about spending in your own life, I'd be like, I don't really know. And as I looked into it, there are literally tens of thousands of books on how to invest, how to grow your money, how to get rich, how to help your career. That topic is endless. There is virtually no book out there written about spending money. And I think the reason why is because I think we intuitively think nothing needs to be said, because the answer should be obvious. More is better, fancier is better. That's the end of the topic. But if you know particularly wealthier people, I mean, it affects everybody, but particularly wealthier people, you know it's not that simple. That the correlation between how much you spend and how happy you are, it can exist. Everyone can spend money in a way that's going to make them happier, but it is not as simple as you think. And as I started digging into it in my own life, of when have I been envious of other people, of their material possessions? Why was I envious? When have I been jealous? Why was I jealous? What kind of spending made me happy? What left me completely flat? It's a much more complicated topic than it seems at the surface. You know, another title for the book could have been The Psychology of Spending Money, because that's what this is. So it's a look at the psychology of greed and envy and social aspiration and like climbing the social ladder, who you're trying to impress, whether those people are paying any attention to you. That's what this book is.
So for someone like me who wants to improve my relationship with spending, I guess the first question is, understanding the art of spending money, simple choices for a rich life, what is it going to do for me? How is it going to make my life better to understand this? Why does it matter to the person that's listening right now?
I think it is a very easy assumption to make if you're unhappy with your life, that if you had more money, those problems would go away.
Yeah.
Sometimes it can be true. It's not automatically false. It's just easier to assume that that's true than it actually is. And so I guarantee you that every single person listening to this right now has some degree of that. If I had a little bit more money, my problems would go away, even if they don't necessarily know it or not. So much of spending is a psychological exercise. There's an itch that you're trying to scratch, and that manifests in so many different ways. And so I've often thought of money, look, is money the root of society, the core of society? No. There's obviously a million things more important than money. But I do think it's the clearest window that we can look through to try to figure out what's going on in our own lives, in other people's lives, in society. It shows very starkly what people value, what they're scared of, what they're aspiring to become. There are many more elements to the puzzle. Your health, your friends, your family, we can go on that forever. But money is a very clear window that if you see how somebody engages with money, you're like, oh, I understand your insecurities. I understand your aspirations. I understand your self-confidence. I understand what you think of other people. You can learn a lot about that.
It's kind of like a reflection of your trauma.
Yes. And it manifests in very different ways. There's a great financial writer named Tiffany Alichet. And she grew up very, very poor. And now she's extremely successful. And she calls it post-traumatic broke syndrome. Where even though she has a lot of money right now, I don't want to put words in her mouth. My understanding is like she's afraid to spend it because the feeling in her head is, I will never go back to that. I can't ever go back to that poor person, post-traumatic broke. And so it can manifest in very different, sometimes opposite ways. And so the point is not like if you grew up poor, you're going to want to display it. But the point is that it's a psychological itch. It's not just, I want the nice car because nice cars are better. There's a social signaling. You're signaling to others, you're signaling to yourself. It's a trophy for yourself of what you've overcome. The more I dug into it, the more it was so clear of like, spending is not just on material stuff. It's not just, I want to buy this car or this house or these clothes or these jewelry because it's nice. It's, I'm trying to send a signal to others or to myself of what I've overcome. One of the ways I thought about this in my own life was, if I was on a deserted island with maybe just me and my family, nobody could see how we were living. Nobody can see your house. Nobody can see your car. Nobody can see your clothes. Nobody can see your jewelry. How would I live? For me, and I think most people in that exercise, you immediately gravitate away from status and towards utility. Like, I would not want a Lamborghini. I'd probably want like a pickup truck, something that has like more utility. If nobody could see it, I would just want utility. I would not want an enormous house. I would want a house with a nice view, because I'm not trying to show off to other people. I just want something that is calming and serene to myself. And so once you start seeing the stark difference between utility and status, once you force yourself to see it, you're like, oh, it's everywhere.
Is something inherently wrong with status?
No.
Is it wrong to buy a Rolex?
Absolutely not, particularly at certain points of your life.
Okay, so when is it good? When is it bad? When is it indifferent? I
don't know. It's hard to say what's good and bad in terms of a formula because everybody's different. But I would say this. My own personal desire to show off materially happened when I was in my late teens, early 20s. And looking back, I didn't know this then, but the reason why is because I had nothing else to offer the world. I had no intelligence. I had no wisdom. I didn't know how to love anyone. I had nothing else to offer. Friends, family, spouses, whatever it would be. And so the last remaining lever, if you're trying to get attention and respect, is, well, look, I have no intelligence to offer. I have no wisdom to offer. Maybe people will admire me for my car. That was why I wanted it. And now that I hope, I hope to today, 20 years later, I have a little bit more to offer to my wife, to my friends, to my family, to employers and customers, whatnot, then my desire for those things has gone down. Not to zero, but it's gone down. There's a great Warren Buffett quote where he says, success in life is when the people who you want to love you do love you. And key to that is like, you have to ask the question, like, who do you want to love you? And for a lot of people, the quick knee-jerk reaction is everybody. And so you want to have a nice car, nice clothes, nice jewelry, because you think everyone's going to stop and stare. When I drive this down the road, people are going to stop and say, look at that guy. Look at her. That's amazing. Like, they're so successful. I admire them. I respect them. And by and large, that is almost never true because no one's thinking about you as much as you are. They're not paying attention to your car or your clothes or your house. They're busy worrying about themselves. Jimmy Carr, who I think you've had on the show before, is that right? Love Jimmy Carr. He said this a couple weeks ago. I heard it, and it was one of those I had to stop and write it down because it was so profound. He said, in your 20s, people worry about what other people think of them. In your 30s, you say, I don't care what anybody thinks of me. And in your 40s, you finally realize the truth, which was nobody was thinking about you the whole time. They were busy worrying about themselves. And look, that's not black and white. Of course, people think about you and look at you and sometimes judge you, but not nearly to the extent that we think. And that was why I get back to the exercise. If nobody was watching, how would I live? The truth is because virtually nobody is watching, except the people who I really love and admire. And they're going to admire me for things that have nothing to do with the kind of car that I drive or the clothes that I wear.
What's the evolutionary basis for all of this stuff?
Life's a competition. It doesn't matter how well I'm doing. It matters how well I'm doing relative to you. It doesn't matter how big my house is. If I'm trying to signal, all that matters is my house is bigger than yours. That's true for all wealth. There's no such thing as you are wealthy once you have X number of dollars. That does not exist. Everything is relative to other people. And the truth is, like, we live in a world of such material abundance where the majority of people listening to this will have some sort of shelter and a car and can buy clothes and whatnot. And because relative to a lot of history, we live in material abundance. The competition, the arms race for bigger, nicer things is extraordinary. And it's way more powerful and potent today than it's ever been for two reasons. One is social media. So I am now aware of the homes that other people live in, the cars that they drive, the clothes, the vacations that they take. I'm now aware of it in a way that we were not 15 years ago. The other thing is because the internet has democratized access to audience and attention, the ability to become extremely rich is much more powerful than it's ever been. It's still rare, of course, but it's easier today than it's ever been to become very, very wealthy, even if only a small number of people are doing it, because your potential customer base is now the entire world. 100 years ago, if I was a businessman, my customer base was whoever lived in my town. Mm-hmm. Now, if you're a businessman, your customer base can be the entire world. And so it's easier to make a huge fortune. And because of social media, once you make that fortune, people are probably going to know about it, because a lot of those people who become very rich are going to say, look at how I'm living. And so you have this like trickle down aspiration of everyone else being like, my definition of wealthy, if you're a young person today, a young person's definition of wealthy might be a multi-billionaire with a private jet and a private island, where I think 80 years ago, people's definition of wealthy was a 3-bedroom house and 1 car and a happy family. And so we live in a world where like aspirations have inflated by such a dramatic degree that the arms race of spending just gets that much higher.
I think there's something in this idea that you almost have to develop the skill of disconnecting your admiration from your aspirations if you want to live a good life. Because so many kids will like look up to you and say, I want to be like Morgan when I'm older, because they admire what you've done. But the reality is they're just seeing the sort of shop window of your life. And so people do this with Elon all the time. Right.
And Elon has even said, he's like, you might think you want to be me, but you don't. And the clip where he did that, he points to his head and he's like, it's a tornado up here. Yeah. And I think it's true that for most people who are extremely successful, who are the ones that people tend to look up to, like the extreme outlier successes, a lot of the reason they're so successful financially and in their career is because they've devoted every second of their life to that career, which most of the time comes at the expense of everything else. So they are very successful, made a lot of money, and that came at the expense of their health, their relationships with their spouses, their children. So I make the point in the book that of the top 10 richest men in the world, there are a cumulative 13 divorces among the top 10 richest people. And it's a small sample size. Like you can't really, say that much with that. But this is a group that is almost universally admired, particularly among young men. Elon Musk, Jeff Bezos, Mark Zuckerberg, how amazing would it be to have that much money? But if you dig into their whole life, not just their net worth, not just the house and the jet that they have, but if you look at holistically their entire life, you're like, I don't know. It's not that great. It's one thing to admire someone if you can pick bits and pieces. I want his house and her car and his career and his physique, but you can't pick bits and pieces. You have to take the whole thing. And once you take the whole thing, you realize that like a lot of the people who you may have been looking up to either did not have a better life than you did, or it was just marginally better in a way that was easy to overlook.
I had this conversation with a girl in New York last week. I was at a shoot, a client, like a brand shoot, and she sat me down to interview me for TikTok. And she said, she goes, what age did you become a millionaire? And I said, about 24, 25. And she went, I'm 24, 25 now, and I'm not a millionaire. And I remember saying to her, I was like, yeah, but would you take my trade?
Right.
And I explained to her, I was like, so I was lonely between the age of 18 and roughly 20. I was working in call centers. My parents wouldn't speak to me, so I had no contact with my family really through that period. And then I started shoplifting at about 18, 19 to feed myself. And my brother had given me this big sort of industrial packet of oats. And what I had to do is it's like powder. I mix the powder with water. And there's a photo online, I think from my previous TED Talk, my first one, where I was just drinking this powdered water. So I said to her, and I was a millionaire at 24, lonely, not speaking to my family, drinking powdered oats, shoplifting, working night shifts in multiple call centers.
Right.
Would you take the trade?
Right.
And she went, no.
Right.
She went, absolutely not. She wouldn't take the trade. And I said, so you can't pick it apart, because if you want my outcome, you have to take the path that I took if you want my specific outcome. And people don't think about that. Like, one of the things this podcast has actually taught me is to think through the framework of trade-offs.
Yeah.
So think about everything as a trade-off. Think of Ozempic as a trade-off. There's a trade you're making somewhere. And even, when you admire people, if you admire what we've done here, for example, think about the trade-off. Like, even with this team, the team have been working here every single day, including the weekends, from morning till night for the last 14 days here in New York, every single day.
Right.
Do you want a podcast? Like,
Right.
do you want the trade? And if you do, fine, but just be informed about, as you say, both sides of the trade.
Another Jimmy Carr quote that I love. He's a profound individual. Not only is he hilarious, he's very smart. The quote is, everyone is jealous of what you've got. Nobody's jealous of how you got it.
Yeah.
And I think it's just so easy to overlook. One of the things I write in the book is what's called the reverse obituary, which is it's a very good, helpful exercise to write down. It's kind of morbid, but what do you want your obituary to say? Kind of a weird thing, but for me, everyone's different. But for me, I would want it to say, Morgan was a good father, a good husband, a good friend, helped his community, was a good worker. That's what I would want it to say. Never in a million years in that obituary would I want it to say what my income was, how big my house was, how many times I went on vacation, how many horsepower my car had. Like, it's ridiculous to think that that's what it would be. I would want it. You instantly drift towards the things that you actually want in life. And of course, it's going to be different for everyone. But I found it a helpful thing because you realize that it would be completely absurd to put the things that I might be chasing in my life in my obituary. And so if in any given day, in any given year, you're like, I got to earn a higher income and I want to buy a bigger house and I got to need a new car. And oh, do you see they came out with this watch? But at the end of your life, that's not going to matter. What's going to matter is, were you a good spouse, a good parent, a good worker? Were you honest? Were you a good friend? Were you funny? That's it. That's what's going to matter because that's what you want in your obituary.
I think part of the reason people spend in the way that they do as well is linked to that, which is sometimes that behavior, which is also linked to the point about trauma at the start, might result in a savings addiction. I often wonder this because, when I was younger, I had this crazy spending problem. And I've also seen people who don't seem to spend anything and they're just like hoarding capital. You talk about this a bit in the book. Like, what is that equally bad behavior?
Yeah, I think it's equally bad because both of them are the exact same thing, which is money's controlling you. Money should be a tool that you use to become a better version of yourself, to become a happier, more content version of yourself. But when it's controlling your personality, it's no different than like any other addiction where it's forcing you to do things that you otherwise don't want to do. And that can manifest on either end of the side. Either people can't stop spending or they cannot spend enough. A lot of financial advisors will tell you one of the biggest problems that they have are clients who have saved enough money for retirement. Good job. You saved for 40 years. You maxed out your 401k. You did everything you were supposed to. And now you're 70 years old and you have enough money to travel and play golf and you won't. You won't do it. And I think it's because they become so accustomed to the identity of I'm a saver. Every month I save and every month my net worth goes up. And they cannot bring themselves into switching gears and going in the other direction. And for a lot of those people, the money is in full control over their identity. It's telling them how to live, what to like, what to aspire to, what to enjoy. The money is totally in control of their personality. And it's just as dangerous and just as detrimental as you when you were a teenager of I can't stop spending. And both of those the money is like playing the marionette doll of your life. It's telling you exactly what to do and when to do it.
If I wanted to make a framework to know how to spend my money, where do I start? Do I have to get clear on something? And I guess the other question, which is somewhat linked to this, is this overarching debate around, can money make you happy?
Right.
But I'm trying to figure out, like, where do I start? Because one of the things I want to get out of today is I want to have a a clearer framework for
Yeah.
how to spend my money.
Well, those 2 points that you just brought up, I think, are very related. The first, on the point of can money make you happier? The answer is yes, but there's an asterisk next to it that we need to get to. For years, there was a big academic debate of, does more money make you happy? Some of the studies showed yes, clearly it does. Other studies showed no, it really doesn't. And the academics, the economists were like battling for decades. It's kind of been cleared up in the last couple of years, this last couple of decades, with